Kevin.
Hey, yeah, Trent, how you doing, man?
Doing fantastic on this beautiful day.
Excellent. Yeah, so welcome everyone to our 5th edition
Yeah.
of the Tower of Glass podcast with your host, Trent the Wizard and Kevin the Viking. So if
Yes.
you ever wanted to be in a room with a wizard and a Viking at the same time, which once upon a time, that was normal. In medieval times, that was normal. You'd always have a wizard and a Viking around. So if that was ever your aspiration, you came to the right place.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
And this is the podcast where we explore the universe and how we fit in and how energy flows. And so I want to start off, picking up where we left off last time talking. We went pretty deep on manifestation last time. I want to continue down that path, and there are a couple of things that we can go deeper on and challenge each other with, and challenge ourselves with, and challenge our audience with. And so I would like to kick off with just another story of manifestation. And I have a handful of stories that I'll be sharing on our episodes that sound unreal unless you experience them. And there's a particular piece of that I want to explore today. So I shared on our last call about, my Altadena dairy experience, which was fascinating. It's a fascinating, snapshot of a moment in time and a moment in life where it's just that's strange, right?
Universe
Did that happen?
Made things happen.
Yeah. So there was another time where I was driving, and it was at a time when, early in my career, I didn't have a lot of money. But I'm driving along, and I'm driving past. I turn this corner. I can still picture it in my head vividly. I'm turning this corner in front of a 7-Eleven, mini mart, right?
Yeah.
And as I'm turning a corner, I glance over at it, and I swear to you, it was as if in neon lights above the 7-Eleven, there was a $300 flashing image, $300. And
Yeah.
I don't buy scratcher lottery tickets. I've only bought a handful of any kind of lottery ticket in my life. But on this particular day, I glance at the 7-Eleven, and it looks as though there's a $300 thing flashing over. I'm like, oh, wow, if I pull in there right now, buy a scratcher lottery ticket, I'm going to win $300. And so I pull in, and I walk up to the counter, and then I say to the clerk, I'm like, hey, so yeah, how you doing? I want that lottery ticket right there. So he pulls it off, and I give him $1. And I say to him, I'm going to scratch it here because it's worth $300. And he nervously chuckles and looks at me. He's like, yeah, it's cool. Good luck. And I scratch it off at the counter, and it's $300. And I hand it to him, and he looks dumbfounded, and he gives me $300, and I walk out.
What? That is an incredible story. Yeah. Experience. I mean, talk about manifestation in the moment, you know what I mean?
Right.
Literally. Well, and there's more than just manifestation there. I think you were manifesting it, but you were open enough, I think, to see universal signals. Like the fact that you saw this $300 flashing thing over some random 7-Eleven, and you're like,
right,
that's going to happen.
Right.
You know what I mean? Most people would have looked and been like, oh, did I just see something?
Yeah.
Did I actually see that? I don't think so. Just keep driving. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, so that's kind of an interesting exploration as well, right? Like, is that manifestation or is that remote viewing? And I've been, in my lifetime, I've been pretty deep on remote viewing, and at one time I had it on my business cards that, that's one of my talents is remote viewing. And part of the experiment or exploration in remote viewing is that past, present, and future are all kind of the same. Mm-hmm. And you may have glimpses in your life where you can see a little bit ahead or a little bit behind, or actually view something that isn't your own experience. Like you can see something through somebody else's eyes, or you can feel something through somebody else's experience. And so like in this particular example, and I have a list of examples like this that I'll be sharing on the podcast, but in this particular example, like I wasn't driving along thinking, oh, I wish I had $300. I was just at a point where cash was helpful. And I just happened to have this vision at that time. And I walked in with absolute confidence that I knew the outcome. And effectively I did. And it's not the only example from my life that I can give. And I have witnesses for a lot of these things, right? Where it aligned for whatever reason, and I acted on it, and it happened just the way I had envisioned. So it's hard to say, like, was I remote viewing that winning ticket, or did I manifest it, or is it both? Like, is it the Matrix, or is it vision? I don't know. Hard to say. I don't know what opinions you have on that.
Honestly, like for me, it feels like a bit of both. Do you know what I mean? In the sense of like, I'm sure at that time there were, you know what I mean? The universe knows where all of us are at all the time. Do you know what I mean? And like what we're asking and what we're needing for. And it's trying to give us that. It's trying to show us signs of like a pathway of how to achieve that, how to manifest that. I really feel like I don't remember who said this saying, but it's like when you make a decision and you make a choice, like literally the universe starts to reorganize itself to help facilitate your choice for you. You know what I mean? And I think that there was a certain thing of like, yeah, maybe cash was hard, but there was the universe saw this opportunity and decided to give you a sign, so to speak, literally. And, I think that it's constantly doing that, but it's a matter of whether we have enough faith or belief to follow those things. Kind of following that intuition of like, I saw that. I know that if I pull in there, I'm going to get a lottery ticket that's going to give me $300.
Yes.
A lot of people wouldn't have done that. Most people, I think, probably wouldn't have done that. They probably would have just waved it off, like, kind of like you said. So I think it's a little bit of a mixture of both, of remote viewing combined with your manifestation of like all of us, I think it's safe to say that most of us are constantly trying to find ways to make more money somehow, right?
Sure.
Probably very
common
few people in the world that aren't trying to do that. So with that in mind, the universe is constantly trying to help us, interact in such a way that happens for everybody. And so, very interesting.
Yeah. So one thing that you can help me with, and we've talked about this before, and this is something that I'm sure you can help our audience with. Not to put you on the spot, but
please.
There needs to be a change in thinking, and I think this is something where we can actually impact society and the world really. And it's this. So, I gave the example of the all Tadina dairy guys before, and I've given this example of this scratch your lottery ticket that I said out loud to the clerk. I'm going to scratch it here because this is a $300 ticket, right? Yeah. And but the thing is, when I know from my own experience, when I tell these stories, I tell them from the perspective of, this is a miracle. This is really weird. It's a fluke. It's like exciting and kind of weird at the same time. And it almost sounds unbelievable. And if there weren't witnesses, like nobody would believe it, right? And in reality, we as a species at this point in time in human history and civilization, we need to reframe our thinking and expect these things. Like, instead of looking at this as the weird thing that happened and treat it like it's so strange and tell our friends in a way that makes it sound unbelievable and people go, wow, like that's so weird, what a weird coincidence or whatever. It would be better for all of us as a species if we could get our heads around it and our spirits around it and put it in a positive, proactive light. Like, we should expect this. Miracles happen all the time. The fact that we're even talking right now is a miracle, as we discussed.
Yes.
And so it would be helpful for all of us if we could better frame how we interconnect and how manifestation should be expected as the norm, not the exception. And I know that this is something that you can help all of us get our heads around.
Yeah, certainly. So I'm going to take us someplace around that, as far as like really changing your mindset about something. I'm going to take us into a philosophical realm of Martin Heidegger. He wrote a book called Being in Time. And I've mentioned this before. I really like Martin Heidegger. He was a phenomenologist. and he was exploring what does it mean to be within the world, to be a being within the world. And like he goes through this whole characterization and naming of this being within the world, and he called it Dasein, their being, right? And then that's what he called it. And then he further named it care. This being within the world's name is care, because we care about things within our circumspective view of experience. The things that are happening around us, we care about them in one way or another, right? We will qualify them. And so then he delves deeper into like more the emotional aspect, the emotional structures of our existence, and saying that there are actual structures, existential structures that guide or help us to move throughout the world as a being within the world, as Dasein. And one of the things that I thought that was particularly interesting in the way that he talks about this is when he's talking about the emotions, he starts comparing and analyzing fear and anxiety and the difference between the two. Fear being something that I am fearful of something within the world, right? I can point to it like sharks, spiders, heights, things that, if I approximate myself to them, I can potentially get hurt, right? It can harm me. So I have fear around that. You know what I mean? Whatever that might be. As opposed to anxiety, whereas like anxiety is not something that we can necessarily point to something like, oh, that's making me anxious. You know what I mean? It's kind of more of this unknown underlying feeling. It's not as direct as fear. And, he posed the question, why is anxiety anxious? Why is that? And so if we're feeling anxiety, like why is that anxiety anxious? And he poses the question, and it kind of brings it back, to something that we talked about earlier in the sense of death. Our death is as much a part of us as our birth. And the fact that we inherently know that, another philosopher, Immanuel Kant, talked about this, about a priori knowledge and things that are learned within the world. A priori knowledge is knowledge that you come into this world with, you just have it, you just know it, you feel it, understand it. And Heidegger kind of went further on that concept with death, in the sense of the fact that our death, we know that is something that will happen, causes that kind of underlying anxiety, because we know that our time here as a being within the world, hence the name of his book, Being in Time, that time is what gives us that kind of underlying anxiety, because we know that it's limited, essentially. There's going to be this point at which this event happens, this phenomenon, right? And one of the things that I really thought that, again, to the more important point that what I think is really interesting is, he said that we need to stop expecting death and we need to start anticipating death. And the reason being is that changes our mindset, the entire approach to that phenomenon. By expecting death, we have a negative connotation linguistically, because it's not a part of us. It's just something we expect. You know what I mean? Like, we characterize it as the Grim Reaper just showing up. You can expect that to happen, but you don't know when, right? But then on the flip side of that coin, if you anticipate death, there's more of an ownership. There's more of a positive connotation. Anticipation linguistically connotes forethought, planning. You know what I mean? There's a certain different level of thought and thinking that goes into it, rather than just expecting. Because if you expect something to happen, you don't need to think about it anymore, because it's just going to happen eventually, I guess. You know what I mean? Whereas if you anticipate it happening, you may not know when that phenomenon is going to happen, but you're prepared for it, because you've put that forethought, you've put that preparation in, you know what to do. And so in this way, I kind of go back to what's interesting about this in my other studies is there are cultures around the world that have created what we call books of the dead. The Egyptians, the Tibetans also have a book of the dead. And these are cultures that are chronologically and geographically separate from one another, yet they came to the same conclusion, that if you anticipate death, these books are all about preparing your mind for that moment of death. and the opportunity that exists within that moment at that time. And if we are properly prepared as a being, right, as Dasein being there in that moment, then there's different possibilities available to us. And so I agree with you in the sense of these types of miracles of manifestation, as we call them miracles, realistically, changing our mindset around them is we should stop and not necessarily expect them, but we should anticipate them happening. And it should be something that we norm, like we anticipate the sun rising every day. You know what I mean? Maybe some of us just expect it to, but a lot of us, I can tell you that you anticipate it. And I can tell you that I know this for a fact because you make plans beyond today, for tomorrow, for next week, next month, next year. You have plans, which means you're anticipating the sun continuing to rise every morning after it sets. So in that kind of same way, that is a really basic way in the sense of how we use language, and not just language that we speak, but the language that we speak to ourselves in our mind. We talk to ourselves all day long inside. You're sitting there and you're thinking about things, and you're kind of going through these scenarios. You're going through these comparisons. You're going through plans or projections or things like that. That is literally you trying to talk to your divine self and trying to figure out what the best pathway is. And so I think by changing that, there's even something they call it, I think it's called NPL or PNL, positive neurolinguistics, but literally using the words that we not only say out loud, but think to ourselves. It's like, for example, something very basic is like when we're talking about going to lunch and someone says, hey, like, what do you want to eat? I don't care. Well, that's a very negative, like, I don't care. I know that's not true. I know you care about what you eat, even if it's not like on a health basis. It's like, well, honestly, I want a deli sandwich rather than some Chinese food right now. Like, we do care on a level. And if it's not that we necessarily don't care, but we would rather have someone else help us make the decision. And even that sentence that I just said, we'd rather have someone else help us make the decision instead of, I don't want to make the decision. I want you to make the decision. Even if you just said, I want you to make the decision.
Right. Or it can even be more positive. You could say, I would love it if you chose today.
Yes.
Right? That's a completely different energy.
Yes, it is. But we get so used to these social, normative ways of speaking with one another, and a lot of it is quite negative in the way that we talk to each other.
Yes.
I see this in, several of religions that I have studied, and, where people are struggling with their faith. And it's, for example, the Mormon faith, which is what I grew up in. People feel atrocious about themselves because they feel like they're never enough.
Yes.
There's this checkbox of things that I need to go and do every day in order for me to be a good person and how I need to do things. And it's one of those things where if one of those things doesn't happen, kind of like I have told people, so what's your experience of growing up Mormon? It's like, well, I always felt like I was a bad person, but knew that I wasn't. And it's because there were certain little things that I was, failing to do every day because I didn't read my scriptures for 10 minutes, or I didn't say my prayers at night, or I didn't go to church that week, or I didn't stop and help that person on the side of the road because I was in a hurry, you know what I mean? Or whatever it may have been. There were all these little things where I constantly was judging myself. And that voice of how we speak to ourselves is really important, especially for mindset. If you're going to change your mindset, you really need to change how you're treating yourself. Change how it is that you're speaking with yourself in not only the positive situations, but also the difficult situations. Being very realistic, acknowledging your responsibility and accountability, but in a positive way. Like, well, I went and I tried to do all this kind of stuff. None of it came to fruition, but at the very least, I was putting forth the effort. You know what I mean? I did my very best on the part that I could do in what was in my circumspective care in order to accomplish that. And if someone else came short on their part, that's no reflection on you, your character. It's a reflection of that person's character instead of yours, rather. And being easy and soft with yourself about how things happen. I think that parenting is a great example of this, with our children. There's these things where, of course, hindsight's 2020. Well, if I'd only done this differently, maybe they would have changed, or maybe this horrible event wouldn't have happened, or maybe this really awesome event would have happened, right? And I think that's the the change of the mindset really, which affects that, is the more you can stay positive on a higher vibrational frequency in the way that you treat yourselves, that will emanate out and attract others that are on a similar energy frequency.
Thank you, Trent. That's a lot to unpack. I'm going to share with you something that I learned just within the past 2 weeks that are along these lines. So there's something that you said that really resonated with me. One is, it's not just about how we talk to ourselves, but also how we talk to the universe, because we do both. That voice in our head is both introspective and outward facing, right? So we, all day, every day, all of us vacillate between, oh, I'm such an idiot. Why did I do it that way? I can't believe it. I screwed that up, to, and then just a moment later, a fraction of a moment later, you're like, oh, I'm genius. I can't believe I figured that out. It's so cool, right? I'm so smart. And there are times when you feel super talented, and times when you have total imposter syndrome, right?
Right.
And all of this dialogue is going on constantly within us. And it's also outward facing. Like we do, I mean, I don't know, I should speak from my own perspective. I know that there are times when I'm like, why God, why? Right? Why did that happen?
Yeah.
And there are other times where it can literally be a moment later, I'm like, thank God, this is amazing. I'm so pleased that these things worked out the way they did. And so there's something that I learned. I've just recently started studying the philosophy of Stoicism, or the Stoics of ancient times, and how they grappled with these same things in other points in history. And one of the things that I picked up on just within like I said, within the past couple of weeks that resonates with me is one way to reconcile your relationship with the universe is to always outwardly look at everything with a sense of awe. And one of the phrases that you can use to express that and connect with it is, hey, universe, I can't wait to see what you do next. Like you're saying, anticipation and enthusiasm. So that good or bad, I'm determine whether I think something is good or bad. One person might think something is good, and somebody sitting next to them might think it's bad, and vice versa, right? At any given moment. And some people take bad, what everyone would agree is a bad situation, they turn it into something really powerful and positive, and vice versa. And so we, as humans, we put labels on good and bad, right? When it's kind of, yeah. And so one way to kind of reconcile that is to proclaim to the universe that you are in awe of everything that happens, whatever happens. And it's kind of up to the universe to just keep throwing stuff at us. And some of it we're going to go like, it's like rifling through a garage sale or something. We're like, not that. This is a treasure, right?
Yeah.
That's effectively what we're doing in our lives every day. And it is very hard to reconcile. And taking this actually down to the micro level a little more, as a business owner and being networked with a lot of business owners, I know that part of being a business owner is that literally every single business, regardless of how new or old or how big or small, every business every day is the tale of two cities. You've got a dozen things in that business that look harmful, and the wheels could come off the bus anytime.
Mm-hmm.
And you have at least that many things that could go the right way and propel you forward and help you level up and have a better business or be more, realize more prosperity or more success, or to be able to take care of your employees better, your vendors better, whoever. And so, and you're always reconciling that. Like you're always challenged with, oh, is this the best day ever in my business, or is this the worst day ever? The reality is it's not either. It's just an experience that you're going through and you're learning from and you're influencing. And so this phrase from the Stoics that helped me to see it in a new way is that proclamation of awe, which is, I can't wait to see what you do next. I can't wait to see what happens next.
Yes.
I'm along for the ride. I'm going to do my best all the time with whatever tools and resources I have. Some of it's going to prove useless. Some of it's going to prove useful. It kind of gets back to the towel glass thing. Like I'm going to find stuff in my glass that I thought was useful and it's not. So I'm going to throw it out and put new stuff in that I think is useful for tomorrow in anticipation of living another day. But at the end of the day, and so I started doing this at the beginning and the end of every day. Like the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning now is face the sunrise and have that proclamation that I can't wait to see what happens next.
Right.
And then go about my day.
It's going to be wonderful, full of wonder.
Full of wonder. Yes, it will be full of wonder.
It's going to be wonderful. What may, it's going to be wonderful.
Okay. Yes, we're doing it. We're going to do it anyway, right?
Yeah.
Let's make it the best we can and see what happens. And worst case, you die. And to your point earlier, there's something you said about that anticipation of death that rings true with me too. So just in any kind of sports, coaches teach players, there's an expression like, don't look at the wall. When you look at the wall, bad things happen. If you're a motor racer, if you look at the wall, you crash. The flip side of that is look where you want to go. Coaches are always hounding that into athletes. Look where you want to go. You want to look where you expect to be.
Keep your eye on the prize.
Where you are now. Keep your eye on the prize. Yeah. And that could be, it never occurred to me until you were talking just a minute ago, that death should be the same, where we should be not looking at that event and thinking, okay, there's this event, it's coming, I don't know when, and then that's the end. Instead, we could frame it as, there's this transition coming up, and this is where I want to be next.
Yes, there's an opportunity there that you can prepare for.
Yes.
I mean, like thinking about it that way in the sense of when I look forward to my death, I'm excited for that moment and for what comes next, for what happens, whatever that may be. You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
I don't know. You know what I mean? Yeah. But what I can also do is that's the beauty of what I love about, studying some of these histories and, reading some of these books, like the Tibetan Book of the Dead and the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and like the things that they believed in, like they came before me and they already experienced this and they documented things for me in order to prepare. And I can take some of it, I can leave some of it, I can take what resonates, and I can start forming my own plan for that moment. I can start preparing, and getting myself prepped, mentally, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, for what is going to happen. Even though I don't necessarily know what's going to happen, I can form a belief around that, and I can really believe in it. Yes. And I think that is powerful in the sense of, again, the universe wants to give you what you want. I truly believe that.
Yes. Yeah, and I've always had in the back of my mind that people do go where they want to go or expect to go after death. So some people might end up in McDonald's. That might be their thing. Hauntings could be an example of that, or an expression of that. That some people think, well, I'm gonna stay in this house forever. Like really, this is where I'm going to be forever. And then they are, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of gets back to that other thing of be careful what you wish for, because the universe is paying attention And so it might be maybe, and this gets back to Tower Glass, right? I can't tell you what's right for you and your soul, but if you don't want to end up in McDonald's for all eternity, plan better and wish for something different.
Right. And like to that point, kind of going back to like the importance of language and, careful what you wish for. People say, well, like, give me strength, universe, God, give me strength.
Yes.
Okay, well, then I'm going to give you opportunities to strengthen yourself. So you might have some hardship coming up soon because that's what's going to make you stronger, is going through some hard times. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Or, you know what I mean? Like, but there's a difference between give me strength and grant me strength for this moment.
Yes.
Instead of give me strength so that I can continue living, rather than grant me strength in this moment to help me through this situation. Those are two very different, they feel different just when you say them, when they roll off the tongue.
Right.
Again, the importance of how you're using your words and the way that you're talking to yourself, talking to the universe, as well as to others. That communication is very important. I think it's one of our greatest tools as creators, is our ability to communicate on the different levels. That is incredible. That's absolutely amazing. In fact, there was a philosopher, and of course I forget his name right now, but one of his quotes that is kind of famous was like, the fact that we can do mathematics is absolutely astounding. It's astounding. The fact that we figured out a way to communicate patterns of nature in this written form. It's like we made some scratches, or we took some rocks and we did some things and said, okay, this is a triangle. And we recognize these patterns that are occurring all the time around us. We created a way to communicate those. And it's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. So again, the precariousness of language and communication, and whatever that kind of communication might be, is important. And giving a little bit more thought and mindfulness to how that's happening for ourselves.
Yes. And there it is. Hey, so a couple of things we've talked about, including music shout outs on these calls. I know you also have a book you want to share. I think we don't have time for both, but do you want to do the book overview, or do you want to do music shout outs today?
Let's do music.
We have an exercise to share later too. Yeah, I'm all down for.
Let's do a music shout out, and then I think the conversation was very conducive for the exercise that we'd like to share with everybody. So
yeah, good. You want to go first
on the music shout out?
Yeah.
First thing that just popped into my mind: Odessa. If you've never heard of Odessa, it is inspirational. It has, for whatever reason, that music just resonates with me. There is just an entire album that's just amazing, but I love them. Odeza, Odessa. Let me double check that and just make sure my spelling is right. But Odessa, they're kind of a lo-fi, techno-ish, but they've got fantastic just vibes around the music. It really supported me at a time when I was actually working in San Francisco, and I was driving 2 hours across the bay to the Marina District from Berkeley every single day. And it was one of those things where on my drive, it just got me in this zone of being able to come to terms with things, plan for things, anticipate things. Do you know what I mean? And really, several times brought me to tears even because of the moment of what was happening. Odessa, Odessa.
Nice.
So
Odessa.
Yeah.
Excellent. I am going to check that out. And I'm going to dig into music history a little bit here from the 80s, and just give a shout out to Love and Rockets. Not one of the biggest bands of the 80s, but certainly had a cult following at least.
Oh, absolutely.
And there's one song, this lyric has been in my head recently, and it's certainly right for this audience, which is the lyric of this one Love and Rockets song is, live a life you love a God you trust, and don't take it all too seriously.
Yes. That's beautiful. I love that.
That is the chorus of that song, and it's really, really great. And it makes sense.
It does. Love a God you trust.
Yes.
Yes. That's incredible. I love it.
Awesome. So yeah, do you want to take us through the exercise?
Yeah. So in the sense of changing our perspective and the way that we are having our mindset around things, Kevin had a fantastic idea. We talked about death and expecting death and anticipating death and the difference between those as far as negative and positive connotations. So one of these things that we'd like to do is try and help you gain a little bit more ownership over that opportunity in that moment. That being, we'd like you to practice writing your own obituary. Like Kevin said, it may sound a little bit morbid at first, but considering our conversation in the sense that your death is as much a part of you as your hand, your birth, my beard, you know what I mean? It is very much a part of us, and to anticipate that. And so, as he so eloquently put it in the sense of, do you want to hear just what other people thought about you, or do you want to write what that is for yourself? What does that look like? How would you like to be remembered? Not just how other people remember you, but how do you want to be remembered when you transition and move on from this place? This is an exercise, again, that is just really trying to help you change that mindset and take a little bit more ownership over what's already yours, which is that moment and possibility of your death.
Yeah, I think there's another piece too, which is the anticipation and the planning, right? Where you can include in your own obituary, tell people where you want to go after your death or where you believe you're going to be. And it could be, for different people, it's going to be different. Some people are going to say, I can't wait to see all of you in heaven.
Right.
Other people have different versions of heaven or the afterlife. Some people might say, I'm going to be sitting on this mountaintop for the next 10,000 years. Come and visit me anytime you want, right?
Right.
Or whatever that vision is.
I'm going to go create a planet that I'm going to host all of you for a giant party.
Amen. See, that's awesome. And it's funny that we as a species today, again, this is today, maybe it was different 10,000 years ago, but today we don't do that. We don't talk about that.
No.
We have religions that tell us, hey, if you do these things, this is where you'll end up. But let's assume for a minute that we all do have free will and that our spirits, like you say, the universe rewards us and wants to reward us. And so if, like you said, if your spirit would love to be the god of a planet and create this planet, and that's where you're going, and describe it. What do you want it to look like? What features are going to be there? A lot of water features, or a lot of plants, or some strange life forms? Or is it going to be completely an energy planet? Like, what is it? Is it just music? Is it just like thumping out beats all day and all night?
Yeah, and we're just like these like vibrational things that just kind of get afloat through the vibes. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
One of the things that I love about this, and I don't know if many people may have, but I think a great portrayal of this is the movie Avatar. Whether you liked it or not,
right?
It's an incredible portrayal of a completely different planet and how things operate there. Their little ponytails that they sit there and they connect with these creatures. I'm like, that is so cool. That is fun, right? Yeah. And we kind of do that, not like in such a physical way here, but we keep pets. We train them. We form these bonds. Yes. We do things, right? But there's a lot of different creative ways in which that could exist and could possibly be. So use the imagination.
Exactly. Yes. I love that. We're at time. Once again, this flew by, man. These
always does.
Just fly by. I always love talking with you. So
yeah, likewise, man. It's so much fun. I know. Well, I'm excited for the next one. And everybody, thanks for listening in. We'll see you next time.
Yes. And can't wait to see what the universe brings tomorrow.
Yes. Yes. Wonderful days.
That's right.
Cheers, everyone.
Yep. Thanks, Trent.